Oh, I've been waiting years for this. The date was August 28th, 2025. It marked an occasion that I have been looking forward to for years. 9 of them to be exact. On that day, after so much agony, delays, and problem after problem after problem, the future of high-speed rail in the northeastern US is here. It was on that day that the second-generation Amtrak Acela trains, the Alstom Avelia Liberties, began revenue service, carrying passengers up and down the northeast corridor between Washington, New York, and Boston. Some thought this day would never come, but it's finally here. The much-anticipated second generation of Amtrak's flagship service has arrived, and with it came a lot of buzz, a lot of praise, a lot of critique, and perhaps more than anything, a collective sigh of relief that one of the longest-running soap operas in the American transport scene has reached its conclusion. And to cap off a saga that I have been wanting to see the successful end of for nearly a decade at this point, it's high time I gave myself the chance to ride the new poster boy of high-speed rail in the US in my first ever proper trip report video, and at the same time, reminisce on the story of these trains, the Acelas service, and what the future holds for these sleek beauties, along with a comparison with a high-speed train in Europe I was on recently as well. It's high time we get the full story of the next generation Acela out there, and both sample how they're like to ride on, and what can be done to make both the trains and the line they run on better in the coming years as they start to make their mark on America's transport scene. So finally, after so long, let's go for a ride on these things to start off this 3-part series I've got. Hey everybody, Steve here, and today's the day I've been looking forward to for a long time. I've been looking forward to it since 2016, and I've really agonized about it since 2020, 2021-ish. But today's the day I'm finally riding the NextGen Amtrak Acela, the Avelia Liberties, starting here in Wilmington, Delaware, and heading up to New York City. There's a lot that's been said about this train, and a lot of conflicting opinions, so I definitely wanted to see it for myself, plus nearly waiting a decade to ride it. It's already kind of agonizing enough to begin with. So let's see if that 9+ years of waiting has been worth it. Let's go for a trip. For this trip, I chose to take a ride between Wilmington, Delaware and New York City. I chose Wilmington over my home station of Philadelphia 30th Street largely due to it giving me more time to become acquainted with the new train and get a better feel for it on a longer journey. It wasn't quite long enough to experience all the way to New Haven or Boston, but I also wanted to get a lot of footage of New York City while I had the chance to. And here it is, at long last, and right on time no less. First impressions? Well, I can sum up my thoughts on the appearance of these trains with 3 words. Drop dead gorgeous. The Avelia Liberty is one of, if not the best looking train to run in America since the age of the streamliners. This is a confirmed fact, and any objection to this is punishable by exile to a traffic jam in North Jersey. Or Connecticut, pick your poison. Though to me, this goes for pretty much anything that is even tangentially related to the TGVs, which these trains certainly are. They all look great, even with that bulge between the power car and the coaches. Honestly, I didn't notice it too much in person or in the pictures I've taken of it, but even then, it's one of those trains that to me looks a lot more impressive in person than they are in photographs. If I were to fault it for one thing though, it's that the livery is not the one they had in the original concept art when they announced it back in 2016. It would have been a 13 out of 10 with that paint scheme, let's be real. But that aside, they look great. And finally, after nearly a decade, let's ride this thing. My train was pretty busy today, as is to be expected, and I gotta admit, one of the things I came to appreciate more with the Acela service is the ability to select your seats, so you know where yours is, and if you book soon enough, you can select a seat that you actually want. It's with this that I was able to select an actual window seat, in my case, seat 10A in car number 5 in the middle of the train. It's worth noting that even if you book a supposed window seat, the window alignment of the seats means that some outside seats have no windows at all. That can certainly be frustrating, but it can be avoided with booking in advance and knowing which seats are affected. And fellow creator FanRailer was able to collate them to determine which seat rows to avoid if you want a window seat. And here they are. Avoid these if you want to actually see out the window. That said, let's finally set off. As we picked up speed out of Wilmington, I was quickly met with one of the biggest upsides of these trains: the ride quality. I'll just up and say it, comparing the ride quality of the Avelias versus trains I've ridden before, even in Europe, the Avelia Liberties may have the best ride quality of any train I have ever rode on, ever. Even on a route as inconsistent with its track design and quality as the Northeast Corridor is, the Avelias ride amazingly smooth. Not long out of Wilmington, I was introduced to this when we rode through Marcus Hook, Pennsylvania and over Hook Interlocking, a crossover section of track that's known to be quite bumpy. And while you can feel it, it is minuscule compared to the times I've ridden on it on other trains. Compare that to the Northeast Regional I rode going back that night, and it's incredible to see the difference. The reasons for this are many, alongside the fact that the trains are just new, but the biggest one has to do with the biggest design change that was taken from French TGV practices, and that's replacing traditional wheel sets with these wheel sets, known as Jacob's bogies, which place a single wheel set or bogie in between two rail cars rather than having one for each. While Jacob's bogies do make it harder for individual cars to be taken out of a train during maintenance, and leads to an issue where one car having a problem means the whole train needs to be sidelined, the benefits are enormous to the rider and especially their safety. Alongside the enormous benefits to ride quality that I experienced all trip long, to the point that I never reached for a handrail the entire trip even while the train was moving, with the Jacob's bogies connecting the cars together permanently, it makes it borderline impossible for this train to roll over even in a high-speed derailment. There was actually a famous example of this in the year 2000 when a Eurostar high-speed train derailed in France at 186 miles an hour, and the train basically stayed intact with minimal injuries to passengers because it had these Jacob's bogies. I will repeat, that was at 186 miles an hour. That's impressive. And it's led to the TGV family having one of the best safety records of any train type in the world that's not the Shinkansen trains in Japan. And the Shinkansens are only safer because they rely on the infrastructure to keep the trains safe rather than the trains themselves. Seriously, the Shinkansen trains have no crash worthiness whatsoever, and that's why you will never see them run on any line in the US that isn't a hermetically sealed dedicated high-speed line, which would be basically just Texas Central at this point if that ever happens. On top of that, the trains are very quiet, which is one of the biggest benefits of having the power siloed away in two power cars, one on each end of the train, rather than distributed across the train like in an electric multiple unit. Granted, electric multiple units do have considerable other benefits over trains with power cars or locomotives, but this benefit is quite nice for the business class atmosphere these trains are going for. Less than 20 minutes after leaving Wilmington, we're already slowing down from the line speed limit in this part of the line of 110 miles an hour to arrive at Philadelphia 30th Street. It's a pretty quick stop, as well as a point where we overtake a Northeast Regional train that was in front of us, as the Acela is the highest priority train on the Northeast Corridor, which is one of the main reasons why the Acelas have notably faster journey times. It's not down to the higher top speed very much. This whole arrangement and its consequences will be the topic for another time, which I'll also discuss in my next video, but it makes it really easy for us to get up to speed after we cross the Schuylkill River through North Philadelphia and out into faster territory. In the meantime, I went to check out the cafe car, which is conveniently the next car over from my seat. And it's here where you have another benefit of these new trains over the old, the automatic doors. You don't have to worry about fumbling around to push a button to open the door like on the Amfleets and such. It just opens as you get close. Makes it easy on you and you can pretend you're a Jedi for a second. I see that as an absolute win. The cafe cars are definitely quite spacious, though they don't really have much space to hang out. There's a couple of little counters to stand at, almost like a certain pizza place in Soho I went to after this trip, which was really good, but it's pretty evident that the cafe car is for getting food and drinks to take back to your seat. In fact, there's space for a self-check to be added in the future to make that whole process smoother. In first class, they bring fresh cooked meals back to your seat as part of the price of your ticket, whereas in the cafe car, you have a good variety of grab-and-go items and easy-to-make meals to bring back. Wait, I'm in the cafe car. How could I do one of these without giving you a
menu shot, menu shot. Right now you're looking at the menu shot, menu shot, menu shot. Right now you're looking at the menu shot.
Anyway, I got some mac and cheese, a soda, and a cookie to bring back to my seat, and not before time, since we're getting close to the point that I've been looking forward to all trip, our run through New Jersey where we would hit our top speed. And it was worth the wait. We hit 160 miles an hour just past Princeton Junction, officially making it the fastest speed I've ever ridden on a train to date. And perhaps what's more remarkable than just the sheer speed is the fact that you don't feel like you're going that fast. There's no swaying, no excessive motion, no noise, nothing. And that noise factor is really impressive. There's barely any, even in the vestibules between the cars. It'd be easy to forget you're moving, and moving faster than any train has ever carried passengers at in this hemisphere of the world. Annoyingly though, the speed doesn't last very long, as we slow down after New Brunswick for the winding part of the route between Metuchen and Elizabeth, while making a station stop at a station that's a bit of a friend of the channel, I guess you could say.
Oh, hello, Metro Park.
Getting back up to speed after the Acela's weirdest station stop still, it's time to talk about the thing that everyone and their mother has argued about and complained about with these new trains. The seats. From all the horror stories I had heard about them, it was easy to expect them to have little redeeming qualities. And honestly, they're not that bad. The most obvious thing about them is that they're pretty stiff seats, and while the padding feels thick underneath, it's not broken in yet so you can actually feel it. That's to be expected though. These trains have only been carrying passengers for just under 2 months as of the date of releasing this video, so it seems likely that these seats will get better with time. Call me back in a year or two and I'll follow up on this point. But easily the biggest bone of contention has to do with the recline function of the seats, or relative lack thereof. Instead of a proper recline where the back of the seat lies back, the only recline the rider gets is from the bottom of the seat sliding forward. Personally, I didn't have too much of a gripe of it on my trip, but on longer trips, I can see it becoming a concern. The longest amount of time someone would spend on an Acela would be just under 7 hours between DC and Boston, so for those who do have problems with this, it's gonna be a big question mark. That being said, comparing it to another mode of transport I've been on recently, American Airlines 787 Dreamliners I flew on between Philadelphia and Copenhagen this summer, I'm gonna be blunt, the Avelias are leagues better than the airline still. 7 hours on an Avelia seat versus 7 hours on those seats, I'm picking the Avelia every time, thank you. Also, the legroom on the Avelias are way better than that, and they're better than the Amfleet 1s, and those trains are already pretty good. Amfleet 2s still win, but those are for completely different kinds of trains, so I don't see that as a fair comparison. Now, there are two main reasons I've seen as to why the recline isn't as good as before. One of them is that adding space to recline means space for additional capacity evaporates, and with train operators around the world, not just Amtrak, wanting to maximize capacity on routes that are becoming booked to capacity day after day, it's a sacrifice to make. And then there's something that I don't think gets discussed as much, but I think people want to discuss. It's the fact that most people, including those who like having a recline function, hate the recline function when people actually use it. Recline functions have been known to knock over drinks, bump into computers or tablets, and cause other problems for the riders behind the person reclining. So in adding a possible annoyance, it got rid of what some would claim to be an even bigger annoyance. And yes, there are train operators that have created seats that enable long reclining, to the point of turning the seat into a straight up bed or even a massage chair. I'm looking at the likes of the Grand Class seats on Japanese Shinkansen trains, or the First Class seats on high-speed trains in China, both of which have external pods that house the back of the actual seat. But with trains at the moment in the US not having the capacity to cope with ridership demand, which is through the roof, the sacrifice of capacity is not worth it at the moment. Maybe in the future when these trains can see a lengthening from 9 cars to maybe 12 or 15, if that's even possible. But for now, there's no real point yet. Get the basics down first and then add the extravagances. Though, honestly, I would love to see them bring back a parlor car configuration. That'd be really cool. That mile rant got me all the way to Newark. And soon after, we see the new Portal Bridge going by as we pass by on the old bridge. The new one is set to open early next year, replacing the old and severely unreliable Portal Swing Bridge, and thus making this part of the route much more reliable. And whilst I'm here and we have a chance, let's have a look at the bathrooms. Bathrooms are found in every car of the train, and all of them are accessible, which is another big perk of the new trains being built with accessibility in mind right from the start. I did see that at least one passenger was confused with where the button to open the door was, but having ridden trains in Europe more than once, I know what to look for. The bathroom is pretty big, and this one was pretty clean. The water, soap, and hand dryer all work fine, that is if you can figure out where to position your hand to make the sensor work. But overall, seemed pretty good to me. And as I stepped out of the bathroom, I realized we had stopped just at the other end of the Portal Bridge, and we would be there for about 5 minutes until traffic from an NJT train cleared up. It's a small example of the wider problems of bottlenecks, old infrastructure, and lack of coordination between train operators that has dogged the Northeast Corridor for years, and therefore stunts every train, including the Acelas, of their true potential. That's going to be a topic for a whole series on this channel, which I've already made one video on a specific issue with the corridor's catenary wires being about 100 years old in places at this point, but there's a lot more to say. In any case, we're nearing the end of our trip as we pass by Secaucus Junction, and I gotta give a shout out to Joseph Calvanaro, who was on the platform filming our train go by that day. Oh, and I'm not sure if you heard that horn as the train came up to the platform. Yeah, that was the train's actual horn, and it's one that a lot of rail fans have taken to disliking, because it's not an American one, it's very much one from Europe. Now for point of comparison, if you're not a complete foamer like me, a normal train horn in the US usually sounds something like this. Or this. The Avelia's horns, however, sound like this. It's little wonder to me why rail fans have given these trains the nickname the French Ambulance because of this horn. Aside from the foamers hating them because a lot of foamers don't like anything new or different than the norm, from what I've heard, there is apparently one important group of people that don't like them either, and that's Amtrak's own maintenance of way crews. I don't have a definitive answer as to why that is, but I have a theory. Having seen Amtrak maintenance crews do their thing on the corridor on occasion, the horns on the Avelias sound similar to the air horns that the maintenance crew's watchmen use to alert the crews of an approaching train. It's why I've been hearing word that Amtrak has sought permission to replace the horns in the coming little while, likely as the sets get sent back and forth from Alstom's factory in Hornell, New York for bug fixes and updates to resolve their issues. All of that is definitely speculative, but I would not be at all surprised if these horns are just a temporary thing for now. It's a temporary thing that, along with the seats, do seem indicative of the hands-off approach that Amtrak took with these new trains, compared to the clumsy hands-on approach they took with the original Acelas in the 1990s. And considering these trains arrived in service 4.5 years late, it's safe to say that approach had its own problems as well. All that will be discussed in my next video on the history of the Acela service though. In the meantime, we're passing under the Hudson River and arriving into New York's Penn Station. And as we step off the train, which has helped with the new gap fillers under the doors, which didn't fail to retract this time and cause another delay. Yeah, that's a thing that's been happening with these trains lately. I, of course, had to head up to the front of the train to get a shot of it leaving, alongside another rail fan who rode this trip as well. Shout out to them. It's a fairly quick crew change and boarding today, and our train heads out of Penn Station to finish its run up to Boston. And after all that, it's time I made my way up the stairs at the other end of the platform to fittingly end my trip in the very nice Moynihan Train Hall at Penn Station, and then make my way to Broadway to give a summary of my thoughts. Also, apologies in advance for my mic quality being wonky. For some reason, my new lav mic was being weird with my camera, and it did lead to a fair amount of static when I heard it on playback. I tried to resolve it in post, but we'll see how good my efforts were.
Alright then, so we made it. New York City. And there's a lot to sum up, I would say, about the new trains, about the Avelia Liberties, and where better to discuss it than here, on Broadway. Yeah, buddy. So that guy was definitely pretty enthused, eh? So let's start with probably the thing that a lot of people would want me to complain about the most in this regard, and that's the seats. Here's the thing, though. They're not as bad as people think. Don't get me wrong here. They can be better. They can definitely be better, that's for certain. But I think they will get better. And here's what I mean by that. To me, a lot of their problem stems from how firm they are, from how, not worn in the seats yet. But you give it a year or two, and that tends to get better with time. So I definitely think in, a year or two or so, we may be singing a slightly different tune about it, but I think the universal thing that a lot of people complain about is the recline function. And I totally get where they're coming from with that. I definitely get it. To me, though, it wasn't as big a letdown as some may have, but I definitely get why it could be an issue there. Seats are definitely not a universal yay or nay, is it good or is it bad? There's always shades of gray on that one, and I definitely think that some people will be ambivalent towards it. Some might even like it. Some will hate it, and I know there's some that do. And I don't think that's going to change unless the trains are refurbished. So so I'd say I'm pretty ambivalent towards them. They're not my favorites. Funny enough, my favorites may be on a train that I talk about in a second. But for me, it's something I think that could probably age well with time. So, what do I think are the upsides of the train? Well, I'd say almost everything else about it. The ambiance inside is beautiful. It's a lot more spacious and airy than even the original Acelas, and the old Acelas themselves are leagues better than the Northeast Regionals. They're better than the Ampletes, and these are better than those in that sense. And the bathrooms are good, though I think it's a bit, like, the activation, like the sink and the soap is a bit wonky, but I think that that could get better with time, especially as these trains get sent back up to Hornell to get work done over the next 2 years as they're getting more and more of the bugs worked out. And there's definitely a few bugs, as will definitely have been discussed. And that to me gets to probably the most beautiful thing about these trains, aside from how they look, which I've already made clear, these things are gorgeous. I will not hear any arguments to the contrary on that. They are beautiful trains. To me, though, one of the most amazing things about them is how smooth they are. The Northeast Corridor is a rail line known for having pretty average track. Like, it's good in some places, but especially over junctions and interlockings, it can be really bumpy, especially on the Ampletes. And on these trains, they are incredibly smooth. The wheel sets and the suspension, they work wonders on the track here. And just imagine if the Northeast Corridor was brought up to like a higher track quality, higher track standard than what it is now. I definitely think they could be smooth as glass. And that also goes into another thing that I really love about them, how quiet they are. You barely hear a thing on those trains. You barely hear the traction motors. I mean, sure, they're in power cars. It's kind of far away from you, especially where I was at in coach 5 in the middle of the train. So I definitely think that the smoothness, how quiet they are, the ambiance inside, the cafe cars are also really nice too. So that is a lot of good marks going for the Avelia Liberties, I think. So my verdict is this. The bad things are ones that can get better with time. Some may need a wholesale refurbishment, especially at the seats, to really get people like more into them, I'll say. But overall, the Avelia Liberty is off to a good start in terms of the benefits it has. They outweigh the positives in a lot of regards. And I think the stuff that is not quite up to snuff, it will get better with time, especially how firm the seats are. That gets worn in with time. That happens on every train seat ever devised. It's inevitable. These seats will get better. So, that being said, overall, I definitely liked them. And I will definitely make a point of wanting to see how they evolve with time there. And as you'll see in my video next time, there's a lot of potential that they have, especially after the crazy debacles they've had over the last 4.5 years to get these trains into service. So, here in New York, might as well film some more trains. And, of course, head back later on. So that said, it's been a good trip, and I hope to make the most of it up here. Back to the studio.
So, as past me goes around New York getting pictures on the subway, Grand Central Terminal, and some good pizza, you may be looking at the time bar and realizing I'm not done yet. While I am done with the train itself for today, I'm not done with the video in general, since I wanted to take this time to make a comparison of the Avelia Liberty with another high-speed train I got the chance to ride on this year. It's a much older train, but it's one that has not lost its prestige over the years in the country it runs in, and in fact it was so revered that Amtrak got the chance to try it, and they fell in love with it. That train was the Swedish X2000, which, like the Acela and the Avelia, was built as a tilting train to get the most out of legacy infrastructure while being as fast and comfortable as possible. And it's become clear that it succeeded in this goal, and like the Acela, it brought a lot of business travelers back to Sweden's rails. When I was in Scandinavia this summer, I took a weekend trip to Stockholm, going there on an overnight sleeper train and spending a few days with friends, taking in the sights and being a transit nerd as well. And on the way back to Copenhagen, we decided to head back via Malmö, taking the X2000 in first class. It's worth noting that the X2000 services used to run directly to Copenhagen via the Øresund Bridge, but that service was suspended a month before we took this trip due to equipment shortages. The X2000 was a train I admired since I was a kid, and it was genuinely exciting to get to ride it. Being an older train, it doesn't have level boarding, but access is still available assisted by the staff at SJ, the national rail operator of Sweden who runs the X2000 and the vast majority of Swedish trains. Also, being older, not all of the bathrooms were accessible either, and in fact at least one of them was broken during the trip. But being designed and built in the 80s, it's something that needs to be considered with older trains. But then we get to the seats. The train we rode on was an unrefurbished set, but these seats, laid out in a first class 2+1 seating arrangement, like first class on the Acelas, and finished in a really nice fabric upholstery rather than the leather-esque upholstery used on the Acelas, both old and new, were very comfortable, and are certainly high up on the list of best train seats I've ever used. 4.5 hours on these things, I had no complaints, and probably would have had none for even longer. Even in second class, I probably wouldn't have had too much complaint, since the seats in second class are just a slightly narrower version of the first class seats, so they could be set up in a standard 2+2 configuration. Again, like the Acelas, funnily enough. Add to that how big they were, and you'd honestly had seats that even Amtrak regulars would be taking notes on. And what's even better, with these trains' recent refurbishments, the seat comfort has been considered to be improved rather than regressed, as has sadly been a trend for seats on trains in Europe in the eyes of many. It ain't just the British. And this is augmented by the fact that, like the Avelias, the X2000's interior ambiance is very nice and relaxing. The lighting makes you feel relaxed, the windows are big, and the seats are aligned properly with said windows. And while it's not quite as quiet as the Avelias, the vestibules have no noise proofing at all, it's still a lovely train to be riding. It really does feel like a proper first class experience, and that's before we get to the meal service on board. With the Acela first class, meals are included in the price of the ticket, and from all reports, they're really good. Amtrak already has a reputation for good food service compared to most forms of transport in the US, but the Acela first class kicks it up to 11 on both the old and new trains. For the X2000, meals aren't included with the cost of the ticket, but it can be included when you buy the tickets, which is what we did. In my case, I went with their fish dish of the day, which was a salmon dish, which I really liked overall, especially the fish. It had that kind of taste of salmon that you had at a good sushi restaurant. It's also worth noting that first class comes with access to the SJ lounges at each end of the journey, much like first class on the Acelas. On this trip, me and my friend Nick chose to hang out in the lounge at Stockholm Central Station. Beautiful train station, by the way, and the lounge was really nice and really quiet and had a good array of snacks on offer before the journey. I've yet to try out the lounges on the Northeast Corridor, but I have seen that the one at Moynihan Train Hall in New York is incredible, and I need to sample it at least once. As for the train itself, being an older train, the ride isn't quite as smooth as the Acelas, but that's a high bar for a 30-year-old train to clear against a train that's practically new. The X2000's coaches don't use Jacobs bogies, and thus every coach has its own wheel sets. However, those wheel sets are self-steering, which helps improve the smoothness. And in fact, the X2000 is one of those trains that perfected the tilting train design and self-steering bogies, which makes it incredibly fast around curves while being smooth and comfortable for everyone involved. It's little wonder to me why these trains were as lauded as they were both when they were introduced here in Sweden, as well as their trial runs in the US when Amtrak borrowed a set to use on the Northeast Corridor in 1993. Why they didn't pick an X2000 or a derivative of it for the original Acela in the end, I'll talk about next time, but there's no doubt that Amtrak wanted to emulate the success that the X2000 had in bringing Swedes back to the rails. And in a sense, Amtrak succeeded, but it's been a long tortured story to get there, and is still not anywhere close to its full potential. And it's that which I want to dive into, both regarding the Acela service and the route that it runs on, to tell its history, its current struggles, and what's being thought of to fix it, and what more should be done to fix it. This trip on the Avelia Liberty was a long time coming, nearly a decade, and from its first impressions, it seems to have largely been worth it. It's not a perfect train by any stretch. Its nearly 5-year delay of entry into service would be all the indication you need to realize that, and there are issues that have persisted into revenue service. But that's the case with a lot of new trains around the world, and the future regardless looks very promising for these beautiful new trains. Over the next year or two, more sets will see entry into service on more and more workings, and all of them will be going back and forth from the factory to get rectification works done. And if there's one thing to give Alstom credit for, is that when the early issues are resolved, their trains do tend to be very reliable, and that looks to be the case for the NextGen Acelas. Perhaps the seats of these trains, often criticized, serve as a microcosm for the state of the trains. Definitely not faultless, and some of those faults are in design, not execution, but they will get better with time. And in time, and as upgrades to the Northeast Corridor roll out over the next decade and a bit, these trains will become the new poster boys of an era of great change for America's most important passenger corridor. One that could see these trains reach the speeds that they are designed for, not merely the speeds that they're limited to. The potential is sky high, we just need to reach it. And having one of the most advanced and modern high-speed train designs in the world, even one as problem-riddled as the Avelia Liberties were, is a big step and a visible symbol going into a new era of great change and a great shift in how we get around.